Hey guys, hello, welcome back to my channel. It's me, Steven. There's Claire, looking like a Salvador Dali melting clock. Very funny. It's one of her favorite positions, just flopping there. But I want to chat with you guys a little bit about my schedule for June. I received that yesterday, and about a word that I do not love. It's my least favorite F word. I have a favorite F word. I can't say it on camera, but I say it all the time in real life. But we all have a favorite F word, right? But the least favorite F word for most flight attendants these days is furlough. Lots of flight attendants on YouTube have mentioned it, but I don't know if really anyone's really described what furlough is, who's affected, how long they're on furlough, and do they still have benefits and that kind of stuff. So we'll talk a little bit about furlough and what it means. With my company, I have my contract out here. I think it's pretty similar to most airline contracts. Furlough is a pretty simple concept for most airlines. But let's talk about my schedule for June. First, May, as you may know, I took May as a voluntary month off. My company has been offering months at a time. So May, they'll offer it for June, and I'm sure they'll offer it in July as well. They'll offer voluntary time off. And I'd say about 2/3 of our flight attendants took May off, and probably following that with June as well. I took May off. The company paid us. What are you doing over there? Helena, what are you doing up there? Helena's climbing on my old luggage. The company paid us 36 hours, so it's not completely unpaid. And they also paid for our health insurance. As a single man, my health insurance isn't terribly expensive, but for a family plan, they're really expensive. So it's a great deal for those people who have a family insurance plan with us. And a lot of commuters also took advantage of that voluntary time off. So I took it off in May, but if you watched my last video, I hardly survived it. I don't even know how I'm managing. It's May 18th right now, and I'm just barely holding it together. I just can't do another month of this. I can't spend another month in my apartment. I'm not going to riot at City Hall with a gun like other people in this country, because I'm isolating out of a sense of responsibility to my fellow man. But I am going a little cuckoo. So I did not volunteer to take June off. In my company, let's look at my Flicka. In my base, which is, I think, about 715, 720 flight attendants in my base, a good chunk of them took voluntary time off. There are only 157 flight attendants who actually bid for a schedule in June. And people way down the list in my base got their time off if they bid for voluntary time off. In May, there were lots of people who were super junior who didn't get voluntary time off, but June, it looks like a lot of them did. So of the 157 people in my base, I am now number 59 in seniority. What a way to get seniority, right? So I'm number 59 in my base. There are 157 of us. There were 11 lines awarded for June. One of those lines is a chaser line for a 320, which means there's only one flight attendant on that entire line. So there are 12 other lines. Each of them have 3 flight attendants. So that's 37 flight attendants out of 157 that got a line for June. I clearly was not one of them because I'm number 57. So thankfully, there's after those people who got a line, after the line holders, those of us on reserve, the people who are on the top. So it's not a surprise. I just told you, I'm on reserve in June. That's what that means. But thankfully, I think I'm in the top 20%. I don't think the math is that hard. I'm not doing it, but I don't think it's that hard. I think I'm in the top 20% of that balance of flight attendants. And if I am, that means I'm exempt from sitting ready reserve. Now, in my airline, Ready reserve means that we spend 5 hours at the airport at a specified time by crew scheduling. It's an assignment, like a trip. So I am on reserve. Crew scheduling can call me in a specified period of time. I'll tell you what that is in a moment. And say, hey, Stephen, we either have a trip for you or we have this ready reserve assignment for you. And so that's possible, but I think I am exempt from that. The top 20% of reserves on base are exempt from having to do ready reserves, which I really hope I am, because having to take a bus all the way into the airport to sit at the airport for 5 hours, I just don't want to do it. So I'm on reserve for June. In my airline, we have 3 reserve notification periods, and you bid for those, and they're awarded by seniority, like trips are. Now, I bid for my least favorite reserve notification period. Before I had cats, before I had a family of cats, my favorite notification period was B. I loved B because that meant that crew scheduling could call me from 7 a.m. I could sleep until 7 a.m. and they could call me until 5 p.m. Those 10 hours, they could call me and assign me a trip or a ready reserve. But they gave me a chance to sleep until 7 and know that I wouldn't be worried or bothered. And then at 5 o'clock, if they hadn't called, I had that whole rest of the evening to myself. So it was really great. But as is my life now, it revolves around my cats. And if you've been watching my channel, you know that my cats are my life. Buddy, in particular, my boyfriend, not that kind of boyfriend, clearly. But Buddy likes to go outside. He's an indoor-outdoor cat, mostly indoor, but he does like his walkabout in the morning. The weather is super, super nice here in the morning, and he likes to go out for probably 3, 4. He's been out for as long as 5 hours on his own. Usually I like to walk around with him, but when it comes to like a 4 or 5 hour walk, it's not happening. So I let him out. If he goes away from the door real quick, I know he wants to go by himself. If he hangs out, he wants me to walk with him for a little while, so I'll do that. Otherwise, usually I just jump back in bed, go to sleep. So he will come back in, usually on his own volition, his own timeline, but he usually comes back in the house about 11 o'clock or so, at the latest. Usually it's an hour and a half, 2 hours. It's been longer. So I did not want to be on reserve where crew scheduling would call me while Buddy was outside. That would have been just an impossible thing. If they had called and said, Stephen, we need you at the airport in 2 hours, and Buddy was outside and I couldn't get him in 20 minutes or so, I would literally have to call out sick, and I would get really horrible, like 3 points. Because I just couldn't let Buddy stay outside and go to work at the same time. I just couldn't do it. So I bid for reserve notification period C, my least favorite. And that's when crew scheduling can call me anywhere between 2 p.m. and midnight. The good news in that schedule is I can let Buddy out when he wants to go out at 5:30, 5:45 in the morning. He can spend as much time as he wants out there and come back in on his own volition. And again, sometimes that's as long as 3 or 4. It's been 5 hours. So he can do that. And he can come back in. I can sleep as long as I want. Wake up when I want. Meal prep, as I've been doing anyway, because I make a big meal that lasts me a couple days because I'm stuck in the house, right? So I can cook for that day and a couple days later, pack that just in case I'm called for either ready reserve or a trip, and be ready. So at 2 o'clock, I'll jump on the computer, check the internet. I wish I could play my video game, Fallout 4, but I can't. But I'll just spend the whole day at home hanging out with my cats, doing what I normally do anyway. And if they call me, great. If they don't, I go to bed at midnight like I typically do these days. So it's the perfect reserve schedule for me and my cats. The other reserve period is reserve period A, which I'm unwilling to do, and that is when they could call me from midnight till 10 a.m. That's a very popular schedule, but it's just not one that I want. I don't want them calling me at 3 or 4 in the morning saying, hey, Stephen, we need you at the airport at 9 o'clock. You know, just kill me. I am on reserve for June. My schedule, I have 3 blocks of 4 days off, and that's not typical. Typically on reserve, you would have 2. This is my airline. We would have 2 blocks of 4 days off that are guaranteed, and then 2 blocks of 2 days that are called movables. That could be days off, but the airline could call me and say, hey, Stephen, we need you. If they did call me and use me on those movables, they would then return those days off to me later on in the month or maybe next month. I have emails sent out to crew scheduling and crew planning to find out which of those 3 4-day blocks I have currently will be broken up into 2 days. So we'll see what my schedule looks like. It looks like I am going to be working, or at least on reserve, on my anniversary, which is on June 28th, my sobriety date. 18 years. Crazy. So that is what's going on with my schedule. I'm not too crushed. I'm kind of... I'm not upset. I'm a little irritated that I'm back on reserve. I just don't like the not knowing if he's going to call. You know, it's like that, excuse me, waiting by the phone for your bad boyfriend to call, you know, so, excuse me. So I'm not too upset, but it could be worse. You know, I could be more junior and not get the reserve notification period. That's a mouthful, that I really wanted. So it could be worse. So let's talk about furloughs. Now, if you have any questions regarding reserve in my airline, certainly drop a question or a comment below. I'll do my best to answer. It's been almost 2.5 years since I've been on reserve, but it's not that complicated. So if you have any questions, certainly drop a comment. Sorry for the brutal editing. I meant to say if you have any questions regarding reserve, please leave a comment below. I'll do my best to answer those questions. So let's talk about furlough. What's a furlough? Who's called back from furlough? What order does it all happen in? All right, so first, a furlough, after something like 9/11 or after this sort of pandemic is happening, there is such a reduction in flying that there's just a surplus, a glut of flight attendants, and the airline's paying for those flight attendants. So at a certain point, financially, the airline just can't do it anymore. The money the government gave the airlines, when the airlines accepted it, the airlines said that they are being told that they can't let anybody go. They can't really fire anybody or furlough anybody until September, the end of September, the last day of September. So October 1st, all sorts of things are going to be said, and maybe before that, and I'll tell you why I say that too in a moment. So we may hear about it before October, but a lot of poop is going to hit the fan like October 1st. I am not looking forward to it. So there's such a reduction in flying that we just don't need as many flight attendants as we have, and this many flight attendants is a financial burden on the company. So my airline just sent out an email listing a whole bunch of ways the company has saved money. A major way of saving money has been of flight attendants. They've asked flight attendants to take voluntary time off. Now, as I've mentioned, we were paid 36 hours for that month, but that means the airline didn't have to pay us the other 36 hours, plus per diem and all the stuff that goes along with that. So then that saved them a lot of money. They've held back on some construction projects that were in the works. I want to say that we've been able to postpone receiving some aircraft we had on order. There's a whole bunch of ways that the company has been able to reduce spending and kind of hold back the hemorrhaging of money as the airlines are right now. Excuse me. So, furlough is the process of telling those flight attendants that are surplus right now that they're no longer needed. It has not happened to me, so it's easy for me to say this right now, But furlough is done in a way that is orderly and kind of systematic, and in a way as fair as possible for those people who have been working for the company longer. So I'll talk about the process of being furloughed. But it's impossible for me to say this right now, but if it happens to me, I'll probably take it very personally. And it's not meant to be personal, it's just numbers, unfortunately. But so let's talk about the process of furlough for my company. The first thing that an airline's I'm just guessing here because the airline's not telling me anything. And I'm certainly not speaking on behalf of my airline. This is just what I expect would happen. As an older person, I kind of have a small inkling in terms of finances in a company and things like that. But the first thing I would expect an airline to do would be to offer early retirement to those people who are making a lot of money. Those people who were just about ready to retire anyway, or just are taking this as a sign, like maybe it's just time to walk away. I'm sure there'll be some sort of bonus package or something. But in the long run, that would save the company a fair amount of money. So I'm sure the first thing will be to potentially offer early retirement to some people. I'm just expecting that. The airline hasn't said anything. And then the next thing would be voluntary furlough. Much like with voluntary time off, the company is going to say, hey, is anyone willing and able to accept time away from the company, unpaid, no money? So is there anyone who's willing to take one for the company, take a bullet for the company? There are people who can do that. That's not me. So they're going to ask people to voluntarily furlough themselves. Wonderful. The next is the unpleasant one, and that's involuntary furlough. So let's talk about involuntary furlough. The company will notify the union prior to official announcement and implementation of a furlough of flight attendants. So the airline is going to tell the union before anything actually starts to happen, and the airline's going to be telling us real quick. This is one more reason you should always be registered with your union, with your personal email and not your company email, so that they can keep in contact, so you're as well informed as you can be about during times like this. Next, in the event of a furlough, and this is an important part here, I'm going to point out one thing. In the event of a furlough, a flight attendant will be furloughed in inverse order of system seniority. There's 2 points I want to point there. A flight attendant will receive confirmation by a form of delivery that provides a receipt at his or her last filed address. So like a letter by FedEx or something like that. So there's going to be a receipt of you actually getting the letter. So the 2 points in that paragraph will be furloughed in inverse order. So if you're the more senior, the more able you'll survive this. The most junior will be the first to be involuntarily furloughed. So the last hired will be the first to be asked to leave. So in inverse order of system seniority. And I took that word to be really fantastic because in the system, in my company's system, I am almost dead center in the seniority list. And that's a very selfish way to, just think about myself and not the people below me. But I want to keep my job. Everyone does. But I'm almost dead center in my company's seniority in flight attendants after just 3 years and however many months. So in the system, I'm hoping that if we do have a furlough, I'm hoping that we wouldn't get rid of half of our flight attendants. That would be significant because there's only like 4,000 of us now. If we were doing this by base seniority, that would be a very different story because as I've told you earlier, there is roughly 700 flight attendants in my base. I'm 400. Not near the bottom, but is that high enough in seniority to guarantee that I still have a job? I don't know. So I would much rather them talk about system seniority, company seniority, where I have better seniority in the company than I do in my base. Does that make any sense? If it doesn't, leave a comment. I'll try to explain it in the comment. So there's two very important parts of that paragraph. The company will provide this is important too, the company will provide at least 30 days notice of furlough, unless more is required by law, or pay in lieu of each day of the notice is less than 30 days, except, because there's always an exception, in the case of an act of God. And I don't know if the company would say this is an act of God, pandemic. They could. War, emergency, revocation of our operating certificate, which is not going to happen, or the FAA grounding a substantial number of company aircraft. And that probably happened in 9/11. So it's possible the company could say that this pandemic is an act of God, and that means they wouldn't have to give us 30 days. But I really think that as a show of faith, I think my company, because they're the people in my company, the company itself is wonderful. They really do care about us. Crew scheduling sometimes doesn't seem like they do, but the company really does care about us. So I'm sure they would give us at least 30 days notice. All right, so the next, a flight attendant on furlough for fewer than 90 days shall retain all eligible benefits, health and benefits, insurance benefits, as outlined in section 18, and will continue to accrue longevity for benefit purposes. So anybody on furlough for less than 90 days, basically you've been off on vacation without being paid. So you still have all your benefits, you're still retaining your seniority. Section 5, a furloughed flight attendant shall retain all seniority and longevity accrued prior to the time of furlough for a period not to exceed 6 years. I don't want that to happen to me. But basically they're saying if you're furloughed, you'll continue to accrue and maintain, which is very different than just keeping your seniority number, but you'll continue to accrue your seniority. So it's not like you're losing it and people aren't passing you as your, if I became an instructor, for example, if I became an instructor, after a year, my seniority with my company would freeze. I would stay in place where other people's seniority would either move before and after me. So they're saying for up to 6 years, if I'm furloughed, I'm going to maintain my seniority and accrue it as well. Yes, I didn't want to be wrong about that. At the time of furlough, a flight attendant must provide proper contact information, blah, blah, blah. I say blah, blah, blah. Yeah, okay. I do. I say it all the time. A flight attendant who remains on furlough at the end of 6 years from the company effective the date of the furlough shall be released from employment. So if you're still on furlough after 6 years, basically you're done. If you want to work for the company again, you'd have to reapply. But that's not really bad news because I'll tell you about recall in a moment. So recall is definitely your saving grace. Let's see. A flight attendant on furlough shall retain the same, all right, this is important too. A furlough attendant on furlough shall retain the same medical, dental, and life insurance on the same terms, same costs, and at the same flight attendant contribution rates as flight attendants on active status for 90 days and online space available pass privileges for 1 year. So if I were furloughed, I would still have my health insurance at the same rates I'm paying now for 90 days, for 3 months. And I would still have standby flying privileges that I have now for a year. There's that, right? So that's good. A flight attendant who at the time of the furlough has completed the probationary period. Oh, this is good too. A flight attendant who is at the time of furlough has completed the probationary period may elect to be paid for all vacation earned and accrued as the date of furlough. So if I'm being furloughed, and I don't know how much long it's going to be, I know that I have 28 hours of float vacation, which I could, if I were furloughed, I could have that paid out to me. And if I were furloughed after July 2nd, I have a vacation week on July 2nd. No, not July 2nd. Early July, July 5th, 8th, something like that. So if I was furloughed after then, I would also be able to collect that week's pay as well. That would be paid out to me. So that would be 2 weeks pay. All right, so then they talk about voluntary furlough. And basically, same story, just you volunteered for it rather than being involuntarily furloughed. Let me find something about being recalled before I continue. Hold on. All right, I found it. So, recall. When the company has recovered and is asking flight attendants that have been furloughed to come back into the fold, they're going to recall their flight attendants. Excuse me, I've eaten too many jelly beans. All right, so flight attendants will be recalled in order of system seniority. Involuntary furloughs first, then those people who chose to be on furlough. So they're going to call back people who were involuntarily furloughed, and then those voluntary furloughs are going to be called back after everyone in the involuntary furlough has been contacted. A written recall notice will be sent to each flight attendant entitled to recall by a form of delivery that provides a receipt, blah, blah, blah. The notice will be mailed from each base. The flight attendant will have a minimum of 15 days from the date of the notice being sent out to contact the company and say, yay, I'm happy to come back. He or she must notify in-flight services within 7 days of receipt to respond to their recall. It's the flight attendant's responsibility, blah, blah, blah. If the company is unable to contact a furloughed flight attendant, and this is kind of like, as a flight attendant, you have to know when crew scheduling calls you, answer the phone, especially if you're on reserve. If you're furloughed and the company contacts you, pay attention. So if the company is unable to contact the furloughed flight attendant for recall, or if the flight attendant does not notify in-flight services as a response, the company will consider the flight attendant to have deferred recall. That just means if you don't respond to the recall notice, you've said to them basically, not interested, thank you, later. He or she will not be eligible for reassignment to duty until the next recall order is issued. A flight attendant returning from furlough shall be placed on the payroll for a minimum of 60 days. So if furlough recalls happen and they recall people and they come back into work and for some reason, like the floor falls out of us again a few months later, that means they have to at least keep me on the books, paying me, I think, for placed on the payroll for 60 days. So just in case, right? All right, so the company, in case you didn't respond to that recall notice, the company will go through the entire furlough list in order of seniority to the point where enough furloughed flight attendants have accepted to recall or fill the company's needs. And then, if they still need people, they'll go back and contact those people who might not have responded to the recall. Does that make sense? All right. All right. Yeah, that's what I just said. If a flight attendant is recalled and there are no flight attendants with less seniority on furlough status, and this is how contracts are read. I think we should be taught by the union a whole class on how to read contracts, because this is all pretty matter of fact. Some parts of the contract are so screwy that it's impossible to read. The flight attendant is unable to return to active duty for a medical reason. He or she may apply for medical leave. If the flight attendant was on medical leave prior to the furlough, that time spent on leave of the furlough shall be considered as time towards the maximum amount of medical leave. Okay. A flight attendant who is furloughed prior to completing his or her probationary period shall complete the balance of a probationary period upon return to active duty. So if you were on reserve, you were on probation and you had 2 months left of probation before you were furloughed, when you were called back, you would continue to be on probation for another 2 months. We have a 6-month probationary period. A flight attendant, and this is like the last part of it, and it's not pretty. A flight attendant who remains on furlough status shall retain recall rights for up to 6 years. So you could be called back for up to 6 years from the date of furlough, and thereafter shall be released from employment. He or she may be eligible for rehire by the company. Doesn't say will be, it says maybe. So if you don't respond to that recall notice after 6 years, they're not gonna, you're off the books. You're not even being hired. So that is what the contract says about furlough and recall. On Facebook, I'm on a number of groups about people who want to become flight attendants with my company. And I'll tell you, a bunch of them, almost every day, there's like 5 or 6 posts saying, hey, when are they hiring again? I got a notice for a video interview and I want to know when are they going to be hiring for flight attendants again? I'm eager to fly. We all get it. We all get it. But it's this furlough and recall part of our contract is talking about periods of time that are literally up to 6 years. If my airline, for example, this is just theoretical, if my airline furloughed half of their staff and flight attendants, it's possible, then it could be, years until we actually grow to a point where we could recall all of those people. So it's not a pretty thing to think about, but people who are trying to get in this job, this profession, you're going to have to really be patient and sit tight because we're not going to be hiring for a while. Just got to say. In my own airline, there were 2 classes of people that were filled with people who had received conditional job offers and had said, yes, I'm interested. So they were planning on going to training. So the next time we are going to be training anybody, we already have 2 full classes, and that's probably 200 people that are already offered conditional job offers, that already have positions in future training should they decide to come and join us. So we'd have to have those people go to training and then get hired and go through all that stuff before we'd even start to think about hiring additional people. So if you're not a flight attendant now and you want to be one, you're going to have to be extra patient. And in those cases, this is a great time for you to sort of take a good look at your finances, because being a flight attendant, especially as a new one, is a very difficult time financially. Take care of all your responsibilities to a car, a house, a baby, a dog. All those things can complicate being a new flight attendant. So this time could be a time for you to sort of regroup your efforts, center yourself in, and be prepared to move forward when we're ready to do that. So, blah, 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 right? It's just been a long video. Reading a contract, not very exciting. But I think this is really important information. And something I really don't think I've heard from a lot of other flight attendants. We all talk about furlough, but what does that really mean to me? So, as I said, I'm roughly halfway up the seniority list. So I'm thinking I'm probably safe, but I'm like Mr. Doom and Gloom. I'm always like, I always have the worst case scenario in my head. The worst case scenario is like, I'm not senior enough, So I'm a little nervous about being furloughed, but I have no control over this situation. And as I said, it's not personal. If it happens, they didn't do it to me. They did it to the number of people, So that's it. That's it. That's all it is. I have to show you my t-shirt just before this video ends, because I bought I don't even know when I got this, and I folded it up and I put it in a drawer and I never saw it again. If you ever bought stuff and just never wore it, it's the cutest t-shirt. And then I realized what hat I'm wearing, and I think it's even doubly cute. But so I'm gay, right? Right. Well, in my community, in my little genre, I am what's called a bear, mostly because I'm fuzzy. And yeah, look at my neck. Mostly because I'm fuzzy and I'm kind of chunky. So I am what's called a bear in the gay community. And I realized what hat I was wearing. It's my bear hat with my little bear t-shirt. How cute is that? All right. There you go. That has been a fairly long video, but I think it may have been fairly informational and useful to sort of bring a context to what the word furlough means to a flight attendant. It's terrifying because we all love our jobs. I don't know if anybody else out there can say, outside of maybe a grammar school teacher maybe, that or nurse, that they love what they do for work. I don't know many flight attendants who aren't eager, usually, to go to work. Almost never do I go, oh, sheesh, I don't want to go to work. That's just not me. As a flight attendant, our jobs are so fantastic. So the idea that it could be wrenched away from me by fate is just terrifying. It's just scary. All right, so I've been talking long enough. I'm going to have a couple more jelly beans and maybe play a little bit of Skyrim because I can't play my Fallout 4, and then go to bed. So I will talk to you guys later. If you have any questions about anything I said, certainly leave a comment below. And once again, I'm not speaking on behalf of my company. Our contract is online. Anybody can find anybody's contract, so it's not super secret information. And I want to say it's pretty standard for most airlines. So I'm going to end this video now, and I will talk to you guys later. Have a great day and fly safe.